My parents refused to pay $22,000 for my emergency surgery. Now they want me to give $45,000 for my sister's dream wedding. I said no, and all hell broke loose. Buckle up because this is going to be a wild ride through years of family dysfunction, medical emergencies, and the kind of entitlement that would make your head spin. I'm talking golden child syndrome on steroids. The kind where one kid gets everything while the other gets kicked to the curb when they need help most. I'm Jake, 32 male, and I've spent most of my life being the invisible son, while my sister Vanessa, 28 female, got treated like royalty. But the real breaking point that came when I almost died and my parents told me I was on my own. Fast forward for years, and now they want me to bankroll her fairy tale wedding. Let me explain how we got here because context matters. This isn't just about one incident or one request for money. This is about 3 decades of systematic favoritism that culminated in them literally telling me to figure out my own medical crisis while I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed. The foundation of this dysfunction was laid early and reinforced constantly throughout my childhood and into adulthood. I grew up in what looked like a normal suburban family from the outside. Dad works in pharmaceutical sales, pulling in around $90,000 a year. Mom's a dental hygienist making another $50,000 part-time. Not rich, but definitely comfortable. Upper middle class territory. 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood with good schools, 2 cars in the driveway, annual vacations to Florida or the Carolinas. Standard American suburban setup that looked picture perfect to outsiders. But inside that house, different story entirely. The dysfunction ran deep and started early. From the moment Vanessa was born when I was 4, the dynamics shifted. Hachi was the precious baby girl, the daughter my mom had always wanted after having a boy first. Dad immediately had his princess to spoil me. I became the practice kid. The rough draft they'd already figured out their parenting mistakes on. The favoritism wasn't subtle at all. When I was in Little League playing third base, my parents would show up to maybe half my games, always with some excuse about being tired from work or having other obligations. I'd scan the bleachers during warm-ups hoping to see them, and half the time they just wouldn't be there. The other parents noticed. My coach noticed. I pretended it didn't bother me, but it did. When Vanessa started dance classes at age 5, my parents never missed a single recital. Not one. They'd sit in the front row with flowers and a professional camera, treating every performance like she was starring on Broadway. They'd take her out for fancy dinners afterward to celebrate. I'd usually stay home with a babysitter, or later by myself, eating whatever. Leftovers were in the fridge. Christmas mornings were a joke, and became a source of genuine anxiety for me every December. I'd get practical gifts, clothes I needed for school, a new backpack, maybe a book or 2 if I was lucky. Sometimes I wouldn't even get things I actually wanted, just things they decided I should have. A dictionary one year, socks and underwear another year. Vanessa would have a mountain of presents under the tree. Dolls, games, art supplies, the latest tech gadgets, a new bike one year, a complete bedroom makeover another year, including new furniture, paint, and decorations. The inequality was so obvious that even extended family members would comment on it during holiday gatherings, but my parents would just laugh it off with dismissive comments like, well, girls need more things than boys, or Jake's just not materialistic like that. They convinced themselves I preferred it this way, that I was naturally more minimalist and didn't care about gifts. In reality, I just learned early that showing disappointment made things worse. When I wanted to join the debate team in high school, genuinely excited about something for the first time in years, my parents said the $25 registration fee was too expensive and I should focus on my studies instead. They literally told me we couldn't afford $25. That same year, they dropped $900 on a custom-made dress for Vanessa's 8th grade graduation. 8th grade, she was 13. I found the receipt on the kitchen counter and just stared at it in disbelief. $900 for a dress she'd wear once. But we couldn't afford $25 for something I was passionate about. The message was crystal clear from early on. Vanessa mattered, I didn't. She was the investment worthy of time, money, and attention. I was the expense. To be minimized, but I adapted. Became self-sufficient out of necessity. Got my first real job at 14 washing dishes at a local diner called Mel. The owner was this gruff old guy who paid cash and didn't ask too many questions about my age. I'd work Friday nights and weekend mornings, coming home smelling like grease and dish soap, hands raw from hot water. You saved every penny in a shoebox under my bed at first, then opened my own savings account when I turned 15, paid for my own car insurance when I turned 16 after passing the test in my driver's ed car, bought my own used Honda Civic with money I'd earned myself, found it on Craigslist for $3,000, negotiated down to $2,700, paid cash. My parents praised this as me being responsible and independent while simultaneously paying for Vanessa's brand new Volkswagen Jetta when she got her license 2 years later. She totaled it 6 months after getting it by rear-ending someone while texting. They bought her another one. I worked my way through community college, taking general education requirements while living at home and commuting, then transferred to State University for my engineering degree, taking out student loans because my parents said they couldn't afford to help with tuition. The loans totaled $42,000 by the time I graduated. I signed those promissory notes myself, watching the debt pile up semester after semester. Found out years later they'd actually set up a college fund when I was born. My grandparents had contributed to it, so had some aunts and uncles at birthdays and holidays. Should have had at least $30,000 in there by the time I turned 18. They'd emptied it to pay for Vanessa's private high school tuition when she decided public school wasn't challenging enough. Really, it was because her friends were going to this expensive prep school and she didn't want to be left out. They paid $18,000 a year for 3 years, $54,000 total that should have been mine, spent on Vanessa's social life. When I found out about this during an argument years later, my mom's justification was that I was doing fine at public school and Vanessa needed the academic challenge. Vanessa graduated from that expensive prep school with the 2.8 gigapascals and no college acceptances, except a local community college. By the time I graduated with my degree in civil engineering, I'd learned to expect nothing from them. I was genuinely surprised when they showed up to my graduation ceremony, though they left immediately after my name was called because they had to drive Vanessa to some dance competition 3 hours away. Couldn't even stay for the reception or take a single photo with me in my cap and gown. I landed a good job with a construction engineering firm right out of college, started at $52,000 a year, which felt like a fortune after years of scraping by on minimum wage and ramen noodles. The work was hard, long hours on construction sites, dealing with contractors and inspectors, learning to read blueprints and manage budgets. But I was good at it, really good. Worked hard, showed up early, stayed late, volunteered for the difficult projects nobody else wanted, got promoted twice in 4 years, and by age 28, I was making $78,000 as a project manager overseeing commercial building projects worth millions of dollars. Bought my own condo when I was 26, saved up a down payment over 3 years, qualified for the mortgage on my own, furnished it myself from Craigslist and IKEA, started building actual savings for the first time in my life, putting away 10% of every paycheck religiously. Everything I had, I'd earned. Nothing was handed to me, nothing was given. Every single thing I owned came from my own work and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Vanessa bounced between part-time jobs and creative pursuits like a pinball, tried being a photographer for 6 months, bought $3,000 worth of equipment on my parents' credit card, took maybe 20 paid photo sessions total before deciding it wasn't her passion, then became a social media manager for a few months, which seemed to consist mostly of posting on Instagram and calling it work. Then she got into making artisan candles, convinced she'd found her calling. My parents funded a whole setup in their basement, professional equipment, supplies, even a website. She made about 12 candles before getting bored, then decided she wanted to be a yoga instructor. So, my parents paid for her certification course in California, $1,500 plus airfare and accommodation for the month-long intensive training. None of it stuck. None of it made real money. Every venture failed within months, sometimes weeks, but my parents funded every pivot, every new interest, every business venture that inevitably crashed and burned. They called it supporting her journey of self-discovery. I called it enabling a perpetual teenager. She lived rent-free in their finished basement apartment that they'd renovated specifically for her, 900 square FT with a full kitchen, bathroom, separate entrance. Basically an apartment that would rent for $1,200 a month anywhere else. Drove the car they bought her after she totaled the first one, used the credit card they paid off every month without question. At 26 years old, she'd never paid a utility bill, never worried about health insurance, never experienced the anxiety of wondering if you'd have enough money to cover an unexpected expense. Never had that moment of panic when your check engine light comes on and you have to choose between fixing your car and eating properly for the next 2 weeks. The resentment built slowly over years. I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me. Watching your parents bend over backwards for one kid while treating the other like an afterthought does something to you psychologically. It shapes how you see yourself, how you interact with the world, how you understand your worth. But I kept my mouth shut, maintained a polite distance, showed up for major holidays and family dinners when expected. I'd sit at their dining table making small talk, watching them fawn over Vanessa's latest failed business idea while barely acknowledging my actual career success. That was my strategy for years. Stay civil, don't rock the boat. Except that this was just how our family worked. I had my own life now, my own success, my own apartment. I didn't need their approval or support anymore. I'd learned to live without it. Then came the incident that changed everything and finally showed me who they really were. 4 years ago, I started having stomach pain. Not terrible at first, just this persistent ache that wouldn't go away no matter what I did. Tried ignoring it for a couple weeks. Figured it was stress from a difficult project at work or something I ate that didn't agree with me. Took some antacids, tried eating bland foods. Hoped it would resolve on its own, but it kept getting worse. Sharp pains that would double me over at random times. Nausea that made eating difficult. Fever that came and went, leaving me sweating through my sheets at night. Lost about 8 pounds in 2 weeks because I couldn't keep much food down. Finally went to urgent care on a Saturday morning when the pain got so bad I couldn't stand up straight. Spent 20 minutes hunched over the steering wheel in the parking lot, building up the courage to actually walk inside. The intake nurse took one look at my face and moved me to the front of the line. They took my vitals, asked a bunch of questions about my symptoms, did some quick preliminary tests. The doctor came in looking concerned, pressed on different areas of my abdomen while I tried not to scream. Then he said words that made my blood run cold. "You need to get to the emergency room right now. I'm calling ahead to let them know you're coming. This could be your appendix, and if it is, it might have already ruptured." I drove myself to the ER because I lived alone and didn't want to bother friends on a Saturday morning with what might be nothing. In retrospect, incredibly stupid decision. I was in so much pain I could barely focus on the road, hunched over the steering wheel, taking side streets because I didn't trust myself on the highway. Spent 6 hours in the ER waiting room because it was absolutely packed. Apparently Saturday mornings bring out everyone who'd been putting off medical care all week. I sat there in a plastic chair sweating and shaken, watching people come and go while my pain escalated from terrible to unbearable. By the time they got me into a room and did a CT scan, the surgeon came in with his face set in that expression doctors get when they're about to tell you something bad. He explained that my appendix had definitely ruptured and I had peritonitis. For anyone who doesn't know medical speak, that means infection spreading through my abdominal cavity. Life-threatening, if not treated immediately. People die from this. They rushed me into emergency surgery within an hour. I barely had time to sign consent forms, barely processed what was happening. 1 minute I'm in the ER bay. The next I'm being wheeled down hallways on a gurney, while ceiling lights flash past overhead. Then they're putting a mask over my face and telling me to count backward from 10. Woke up hours later, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, run over again for good measure. Then maybe hit one more time just to be sure. Tubes coming out of my arms for 4 medications, a drain tube in my side. That looked medieval, and hurt worse than anything I'd experienced. Every breath felt like knives in my abdomen. The surgeon came by during evening rounds and explained in detail just how bad it had been. They'd had to do extensive cleaning of my abdominal cavity because the infection had spread pretty far. The appendix had been ruptured for at least 48 hours based on what they found. Another day or two and I might not have made it. I'd be in the hospital for at least 5 to 7 days on 4 antibiotics, possibly longer if complications developed, then weeks of recovery at home before I could even think about returning to work. No lifting, no driving for at least 2 weeks. Limited mobility, high risk of infection at the surgical sites. That's when reality hit me like a second truck. The money. I had health insurance through my job. It was actually pretty decent coverage, all things considered. But I chose a high deductible plan because the premiums were lower, and I was young and healthy, and never went to the doctor. The kind of decision you make when you're trying to save money and can't imagine ever needing serious medical care. The deductible was $22,000. $22,000. The number was so large it didn't even seem real at first. I asked the financial counselor to repeat it 3 times, convinced I'd misheard. But no, that was the amount. $22,000 I'd be personally responsible for before my insurance would cover a single dollar. The hospital billing department was very sympathetic but very clear about the situation. I'd be responsible for that amount regardless of anything else. They could set up a payment plan, work with me on the billing, but the money was owed, period. That's how insurance works when you pick the cheap plan. I was 28 years old. I'd been saving aggressively for 3 years. Building up an emergency fund like all the personal finance blogs said you should. Had about $14,000 in savings that I'd been so proud of. Money that had taken real sacrifice to accumulate. Skipping social events. Brown bagging lunch every day. Driving my old Honda instead of upgrading. Saying no to vacations with friends. This would wipe that out completely and leave me $8,000 in debt on top of it. And I'd be out of work for at least a month. Maybe more, meaning reduced income right when I needed it most. Short-term disability would only cover 60% of my salary. From my hospital bed on day 2, still hooked up to 4 antibiotics and feeling like garbage, I called my parents, hands shaking as I dialed their number, explained the situation as clearly as I could through the pain medication fog. Told them about the surgery, the complications, the extended hospital stay, the unexpected massive medical bills. I wasn't even asking for the full amount, just whatever they could help with. Even $5,000 would make an enormous difference. I'd pay them back over time with interest if they wanted. Just needed some help to avoid complete financial ruin. My dad's response after a long pause. That's rough. Have you looked into the hospital's financial assistance programs? I made too much to qualify. $78,000 a year put me well above the threshold. I explained this and asked again if there was any way they could help me out even. Just a loan I'd pay back over time with a written agreement and everything. Another long pause. Then Mom got on the phone with that particular tone of voice that meant she was about to say something she'd rehearsed. Jake, we'd love to help, but we just don't have that kind of money lying around right now. Maybe you should have gotten better insurance when you had the chance. This is part of being an adult, dealing with unexpected expenses and planning ahead for emergencies. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was in a hospital bed, recovering from emergency surgery that had literally saved my life, and they were giving me a lecture about insurance choices and financial planning like I was a child who'd spent his allowance unwisely. "You helped Vanessa with her car down payment," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That was $11,000 last year. That was different. She needed reliable transportation to get to work. I need to not be in crushing medical debt from life-saving surgery. Well, maybe if you'd been more careful about your health." That's when I realized they were actually trying to blame me for getting sick. Like I'd chosen to have my appendix rupture. Like this was some lifestyle choice I'd made, and now had to deal with the consequences. Dad took the phone back, voice firm. "Look, we're sorry you're going through this, but we can't just drop everything to bail you out. You have a good job, you're smart, you'll figure it out. That's what we raised you to do. Be independent, and handle your own problems. Handle your own problems." Those words hit me like physical blows. This wasn't a problem I'd created. This was a medical emergency that happened to me through no fault of my own, and they were treating it like I'd made a bad financial decision, and now needed to learn a lesson. "Can you at least come visit?" I asked, hating how pathetic I sounded. "We'll try to get by this week," Mom said. "But your dad has a big presentation Wednesday, and I've got that charity event on Thursday." They visited me once during my entire week-long hospital stay, showed up on Saturday afternoon, stayed for maybe 40 minutes, spent most of that time talking about how stressed Vanessa was about her latest failed business venture, the candle thing that was already falling apart. Apparently she was really struggling with it, and they were worried about her emotional state. I'm lying in a hospital bed with tubes coming out of me, facing financial ruin, and they're telling me how hard things are for Vanessa because her hobby business isn't working out. They didn't bring food, even though hospital food is terrible. Didn't offer to help with anything when I got discharged. Didn't ask what they could do, or how they could support me. Just checked the box of having visited their sick son and left. I watched them walk out of my hospital room and had this moment of crystal clarity. I was completely alone in this. Vanessa never came at all. Not once. Sent a text on day 3. "Sorry you're sick. Hope you feel better soon," with a flower emoji. That was the extent of her concern for her brother, who was in the hospital fighting a potentially fatal infection. I spent that week lying in a hospital bed watching nurses come and go, dealing with pain and discomfort, and the humiliation of needing help with basic functions, facing down a financial catastrophe that would set me back years of careful saving, all while knowing my parents were perfectly capable of helping but had chosen not to. They had the money. I knew they had it. They'd just spent $11,000 on Vanessa's car down payment without blinking. They were planning their annual vacation to Florida in a few months. Dad had recently bought himself new golf clubs, but helping their son during a medical emergency, too much to ask. When I got discharged after 7 days, I took an Uber home because asking them for a ride felt pointless. Paid $42 from my rapidly dwindling bank account to get myself and my small bag of belongings back to my condo. The driver helped me up the stairs because I could barely walk. Spent the next month recovering alone in my condo, going to follow-up appointments by myself, dealing with insurance paperwork and hospital billing departments while still healing from major surgery. The surgical drains had to stay in for 2 weeks, and I had to manage them myself. Had to change my own bandages, monitor my own incisions for signs of infection, measure and record drainage output like I was my own nurse. My co-worker Randy found out what happened and organized a meal train where people from the office brought me food for 2 weeks. These were people I barely knew outside of work, but they showed up anyway, brought me groceries, picked up prescriptions, sat with me for an hour just to provide some human contact. My buddy from college, Tim, drove over from 2 hours away every few days to check on me and help with things I couldn't do myself. He'd take out my trash, help me shower, getting the bandages wet, make sure I was taking my medications correctly, showed up without being asked, never complained about the drive. My parents called twice during that entire month, both times, to tell me about something happening with Vanessa. First call was about her deciding to close down the candle business. They wanted to know if I wanted to buy any of the leftover supplies it cost. Second call was about her new idea to become a yoga instructor. Weren't they excited about this new direction for her? Neither call included asking how I was doing, if I needed anything, how my recovery was going. It was like my medical crisis had already been forgotten because it was inconvenient to think about. I paid off that medical debt over the next 3 years, $22,000 paid through automatic monthly withdrawals that left me constantly stressed about money. $611 a month for 36 months. Every single payment a reminder of the day my parents chose not to help me. Had to delay buying a new car when my Honda started having serious problems at 215,000 miles. Couldn't save for a house down payment like I'd planned. Put my entire life on hold to pay off debt from an emergency that wasn't my fault and that my parents could have helped with if they'd wanted to. During those 3 years, I watched them help Vanessa with multiple expensive things. Every time I heard about another bailout or funding for another failed venture, it felt like a knife twisting deeper into an old wound that never healed. The resentment during those years was intense. Every automatic payment that withdrew from my checking account felt like a reminder of their betrayal. Every time I saw my parents post on social media about helping Vanessa with something new, the anger built. But I kept silent, maintained minimal contact, told myself it would eventually be paid off and I could move on. Finally, 3 years and 2 months after that surgery, I made the final payment, watched my loan balance hit zero. Should have felt relief, but mostly I just felt angry. Angry at the time lost, the opportunities missed, the stress endured, all of it unnecessary. If my parents had just to help their son during a medical emergency. The breaking point came 3 months ago, right when I'd finally started rebuilding my savings and feeling financially stable again. I got a call from Mum on a Tuesday afternoon asking if I was free for Sunday dinner, said they had exciting news to share, and wanted the whole family there. Her voice had that particular cheerful quality that meant something big was happening. I figured Vanessa had gotten a new job or something, maybe actually found something that would stick for once, agreed to come, marked it on my calendar. Didn't think much of it beyond hoping dinner wouldn't be too awkward given our relationship, that showed up to their house that Sunday to find what I can only describe as a full celebration setup. There was a 2-tier cake from the expensive bakery downtown, balloons everywhere, silver and gold ones that said congratulations banner stretched across the dining room, and Vanessa sitting at the dining room table with her boyfriend Dylan, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery, holding hands and practically glowing with excitement. They were engaged. I forced enthusiasm I didn't feel, offered congratulations that probably sounded hollow, made the expected small talk about how he proposed and whether she was surprised. Dylan's a decent guy, works in it making around $65,000, seems stable and mature, treats Vanessa well from what I can see. If she was happy, fine, whatever, not my business. Then Dad stood up to make his announcement, tapping his glass with a fork like we were at a formal event. "We are so excited to help Vanessa and Dylan start their life together," he began, voice full of emotion. "We've been planning this for months, saving and preparing for this day. We know how expensive weddings can be, how stressful it is for young couples just starting out. I had a sinking feeling about where this was going. So, we're going to give them $45,000 toward their wedding and first year of marriage. Consider it our gift to help launch their future together. $45,000. The room spun a little. I gripped the edge of the dining table to steady myself. The same parents who couldn't spare $22,000 when I almost died were casually announcing they'd drop $40,000 on a wedding, more than double what they'd refused to help me with during a life-threatening medical emergency. "We're thinking a destination wedding," Vanessa gushed, leaning forward with excitement. "Maybe Italy or Greece or possibly the Amalfi Coast, something really special and memorable that our friends will talk about for years. And the $45,000 will help with the ceremony, the honeymoon, and getting set up in a new apartment together." Mom was practically glowing with joy. "We've been saving specifically for Vanessa's wedding for years. We started a fund when she turned 18. We want her special day to be absolutely perfect. Something she'll remember forever." That phrase, saving for years, hit me like a physical blow. They'd been systematically saving money for Vanessa's hypothetical future wedding during the entire time I was drowning in medical debt from an actual life-threatening emergency. "That's very generous," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "We're also hoping you'll contribute," Dad said, turning to look at me directly. "As her older brother, it would mean a lot to Vanessa if you helped make her dream wedding come true. We were thinking maybe you could chip in $20,000 or $25,000. You're doing really well with your career now." The room went completely silent. Everyone was looking at me expectantly. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You want me to give Vanessa $20,000 to $25,000 for her wedding?" "It's what family does," Dad added. "We all pitch in to help each other during important life moments." Something inside me snapped. Important life moments like emergency surgery to save your life. The temperature in the room dropped about 40 degrees. "That was different," Dad said. How exactly was that different?" "You had insurance. You had options. This is about family celebration. And I had insurance with a $22,000 deductible that wiped out my entire life savings and left me in debt for 3 years. And you told me to figure it out myself because I'm an adult who should handle my own problems." "Jake, this isn't the time or place," Mom started. "When is the time? When is it ever the right time to talk about how you've treated me versus how you treat Vanessa? You couldn't spare $22,000 when I was literally dying in a hospital bed. But you've got $45,000 ready to go for a party." "A wedding isn't just a party," Vanessa said defensively. I turned to look at her directly. "You're right, it's not. But neither was life-saving surgery. And nobody organized a savings fund for that. Nobody made a cake. Nobody asked how they could help me survive." "You never asked for help," Mom said. "I literally called you from my hospital bed and asked for help. You told me to check for financial assistance programs and hung up." Dylan looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Smart guy." Dad's face was getting red. "We're not going to relitigate past decisions. The question is whether you're going to support your sister during this important time in her life or whether you're going to be selfish." "My answer is no," Vanessa's face crumpled. You're seriously going to ruin my wedding because you're still bitter about some medical bills from years ago. I'm not ruining anything. You've got $45,000 from mom and dad. Have whatever wedding you want with that. But I'm not contributing a dime. This is so typical of you, Vanessa said through tears. Always making everything about yourself. This is supposed to be my moment, and you're turning it into some drama about ancient history. Ancient history. I made my final payment 8 months ago. The debt from a medical emergency your parents could have helped with, but chose not to. Mum tried the guilt trip. We raised you better than this. Family helps family, you're right. Family does help family, but apparently that only applies when it's Vanessa who needs help. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. Where are you going? Dad demanded. Home. Congratulations on the engagement, Vanessa. I hope you have a great wedding, but pay for it yourselves. I left before anyone could respond. Drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, adrenaline pumping through my system. Got home and immediately texted Tim. You won't believe what just happened. His response came fast. Come over, bring details. The fallout started the next morning. Mom called at 6:30 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. By noon I had 17 missed calls and texts escalating from, we need to talk to, you're being incredibly selfish, to, how can you do this to your sister? Dad's messages were shorter and angrier. Vanessa sent a long emotional text about how I was abandoning her during the most important time of her life. I didn't respond to any of them. My Aunt Caroline called Friday. Mom's older sister, usually pretty reasonable. Your mother called me very upset. She started, I bet she did. I gave her the full story. The $22,000 in medical debt, years of favoritism, the $45,000 for Vanessa's wedding, the request for another $25,000 on top of that. Long silence. I had no idea about the surgery situation. Caroline finally said, your mother never mentioned it. They didn't tell anyone. This is beyond favoritism. This is cruel. Hearing someone in my family finally acknowledge what I'd experienced felt validating. I'm not giving them money. For a wedding, I said, you're not the bad guy. Don't let them guilt you. The pressure campaign continued for weeks. They tried every manipulation tactic. Then they escalated. 3 weeks later, I got a message from Vanessa's friend. She'd posted in a wedding planning group about her selfish brother. I screenshot the thread and sent it to Vanessa. Really, you're putting our family business on social media? Her response, maybe if you're getting called out by everyone, you'll realize how wrong you are. That's when I decided to take control. I called my parents and told them we needed to meet one time only. Neutral location, a coffee shop near their house. Showed up Saturday morning with a folder full of documents. Sat down across from them. I'm going to say this once. I'm not giving Vanessa money for her wedding. Not $25,000, not $500, nothing, Jake. Mom started. I held up my hand. You raised me to be independent and handle my own problems. Those are your exact words. So that's what I'm doing. This is different, Dad said. No, it's not. You taught me that family doesn't bail each other out. I learned that lesson well. I pulled out my hospital bills, $22,000 in medical debt. I paid it off over 3 years while you funded Vanessa's failed ventures. Next document, the list of everything they'd given Vanessa. Conservative estimate, $95,000 to Vanessa since she turned 18. In that same time, 0 to me. Their faces went pale. Here's what's happening. I'm not contributing to the wedding. I'm not coming either. And moving forward, I'm treating you exactly how you treated me, with polite distance and 0 support. You're cutting us off, Mom asked. No, you cut me off 4 years ago. I'm just accepting that reality. This is ridiculous, Dad said. You're throwing away your family over money. No, you chose money over me when I needed you. I'm just respecting that choice. I stood up and left the folder. That's documentation of what you've spent on Vanessa versus me. Keep it. Show people when they ask why I'm not at the wedding. Walked out feeling lighter than I had in years. The nuclear fallout was immediate. My parents told everyone I'd disowned the family. Extended family reached out, most taking their side initially. But something interesting happened. Caroline shared my side with key family members, including Uncle Frank. He called, I'm disgusted. I had no idea they'd left you hanging. Several relatives had assumed my parents helped with medical bills. When they found out the truth, the narrative shifted. My cousin Melissa, a nurse, was horrified. They didn't help after emergency surgery. That's not just unsupportive, that's horrifying. The unified front cracked. Meanwhile, my life improved dramatically. Blocked their numbers, set social media to private, created boundaries I should have years ago. Work was going well. Another promotion and raise. Started dating someone. Took a vacation with Tim, most relaxing week in years. 6 weeks later, I got an email from Dad. We need to talk. Didn't open it. Sent to spam. The wedding happened last month. From what Caroline told me, it was nice, but smaller than Vanessa wanted. Budget issues. The $45,000 wasn't stretching far. Tragic. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories.